I didn't think much about the tiny hole above my bedroom door until I realized it hadn't always been there. This happened last winter, a few months after I ended a 7-year relationship. I was 29 and working as a freelance graphic designer, so I could live almost anywhere with reliable internet. I found a cheap room in an old duplex that had been divided into separate rentals. It was available immediately, and at the time that was enough. The house had 4 bedrooms connected by one long hallway. My room faced another bedroom directly across from it. The shared kitchen was at the front, the laundry room was near the back stairs, and a square attic hatch sat in the hallway ceiling. The house was old, pipes knocked, floorboards creaked, and rain tapped against the gutters most nights. 3 other people lived there. Maya worked early shifts at a hospital. Chris took night classes and was rarely home. The 4th roommate was Nolan, whose room faced mine. Nolan was quiet and awkward, but not rude. He spent most of his time in his room and usually wore headphones in the kitchen. When we passed in the hallway, he would nod or make brief small talk. I assumed he was shy. I worked late because several clients were in different time zones. I would sit at my desk until 1 or 2 in the morning, wearing headphones during calls. The first strange moment happened in the kitchen. I was making coffee when Nolan asked how the restaurant logo was going. I had never told him I was designing one. He noticed my confusion and pointed toward the ceiling. He said the walls were so thin he could hear everything through them. It made sense. I had mentioned the project during a call the night before. A few days later, he asked if my sister had recovered from the flu. Again, I had never told him I had a sister. He gave the same explanation. Thin walls. Voices carrying through the hallway, old houses being terrible for privacy. I laughed it off, but I started lowering my voice during calls. Then, he mentioned one of my clients by name. It was a small landscaping business in another state. He asked if Mark had approved the latest draft. I had only said Mark's name during a call inside my room. Nolan seemed to know when I ordered food. He would leave his room just as the delivery arrived, even when the driver did not knock. He knew my mother usually called on Sundays. Once, he asked whether I was visiting my uncle for Christmas. I had discussed that in a private video call. Still, the hallway carried sound. I could hear Maya's alarm through 2 doors and Chris laughing from the kitchen. I told myself Nolan was simply observant. Then, my packages started arriving opened. The first was a box of printer ink. One side had been peeled back and pressed closed again. Nothing was missing, so I assumed it had been damaged during shipping. The next package contained a phone charger. The tape had been cut neatly across the top. Nolan was in the kitchen when I brought it inside. He glanced at the box and asked whether I had finally replaced the charger that kept disconnecting. I had complained about that charger in an email, not out loud. I asked how he knew. He froze for a second, then said he must have heard me mention it. That night, I changed my email password. A few days later, I returned from buying groceries and found my bedroom door unlocked. I was almost certain I had locked it. My laptop was still on the desk. My wallet was in the drawer. Nothing seemed disturbed. I tried to remember leaving, but I couldn't clearly picture turning the lock. I decided I had forgotten. The next evening, Nolan stopped outside my door while I was working. He looked toward my laptop and said, "That client seems angry." The email on my screen was from a client complaining about a missed deadline. From the hallway, Nolan could not have read it. The screen faced away from the door, and I was sitting in front of it. I closed the laptop and asked what he meant. He shrugged and said he could tell by my face. After that, I locked my laptop, changed my passwords again, and covered the webcam with tape. Then I noticed that Nolan always appeared seconds after my phone calls ended. I would hang up, remove my headphones, and hear his door open across the hall. Sometimes he went to the bathroom. Sometimes he walked to the kitchen and returned without taking anything. It happened often enough that I started waiting silently after calls. One night, after speaking to my mother, I kept my headphones on and pretended the conversation was continuing. About 30 seconds after I actually ended it, I heard a light scraping sound above me. It moved across the ceiling. I looked up. The sound stopped. The house had mice before, but this sounded heavier, like weight shifting across wooden beams. Over the next week, I heard it 3 more times. Always late at night. Always after I had been talking. I finally told the landlord I thought something was in the attic. He said there were traps up there and suggested I check them. On Saturday afternoon, while the others were out, I pulled down the attic ladder. The space above was narrow, cold, and filled with insulation. I climbed up with my phone flashlight. Then I noticed fresh shoe prints in the dust. They led from the hatch toward the area above my bedroom. I should have climbed down and called the police. Instead, I followed them. Near the insulation, I found a black cable running between 2 beams. It disappeared under a strip of fiberglass and continued toward the hallway. I lifted the insulation carefully. The cable ended at a tiny black camera fixed between the wooden supports. Its lens pointed through a drilled hole above my bedroom door. From that angle, it could see my desk, my bed, and most of the room. A small green light blinked on the side. It was active. I unplugged the cable and removed the camera. My hands shook so badly that I nearly dropped it through the ceiling. I wanted to confront Nolan, but I didn't know what he might do. So I replaced the insulation, climbed down, and hid the camera in my backpack. When Nolan came home, I acted normal. That night, I sat on my bed with the lights off and my phone recording. Just after 1, the attic hatch creaked. A few seconds later, the folding ladder groaned. Someone climbed up slowly. A body moved across wood. Insulation shifted. Then came a muffled cough. The movement stopped over my door. I stepped into the hall. The attic ladder was down, and Nolan's bedroom door was open. I folded the ladder up, pushed the hatch closed, and wedged the metal laundry rack beneath it. Then I secured the rack to the wall with a bicycle cable. The movement above stopped. A moment later, something pressed down against the hatch. Once, then harder. Nolan said my name from inside the ceiling. He sounded calm. He asked me to open the hatch. I backed into my room, locked the door, and called the police. While I waited, he kept speaking through the ceiling. First, he said he was checking for a leak. Then he said the hatch had closed by accident. After that, he stopped talking. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. They removed the rack and ordered him down. Nolan climbed out covered in insulation, insisting it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. Police searched his room and found hard drives, memory cards, and folders labeled with dates and bedroom numbers. Some recordings were from before I moved in. There were months of footage from previous tenants. People working, changing clothes, sleeping, and having private conversations. Most had moved away without ever knowing. The camera above my door had not been his first. The landlord replaced the attic hatch and all the bedroom locks. I moved out that week. What disturbed me most was how ordinary Nolan had seemed. He never threatened me or stared openly. He barely spoke. He just listened, watched, and waited for everyone to assume the house had thin walls. I still work from home, but I no longer trust a closed door to mean privacy. Whenever I stay somewhere new, I check every smoke detector, vent, ceiling corner, and small hole near the door, because once you find a camera that was meant to stay hidden,